Hey everybody, this is Perch. One of the interesting things about the format of this channel is that I will record a lot of things and they'll get piled up and eventually I process them and put them in. Any given time, I've got somewhere between, I don't know, on the low end, like 20 videos or so, and on the high end, like 80 that are just sitting there waiting to get processed to come out. People ask me, like, why do you put out so many videos? Why do you put out, 3 a day? Well, a big reason is that if I didn't, that number would skyrocket and I'd find myself, and I did at one point, I found myself putting up videos 6 months in advance. And the problem is they age badly. Some of the things people want to talk about are things that are happening right now. So if I record a video and I throw it up, and then and this happened a few times. I put up a video and it's like, hey, there's this thing going on right now with I don't know, with Charlie Sheen. He's in some trouble, and people are like, what is he talking about? That was 9 months ago, and that can happen. But one of the other interesting things I have that I notice, and credit to the people who do, because most don't, is that people will listen to my channel and they'll listen to a video and they'll listen to some of the prediction, and then they'll repeat the same prediction on their channel, which is fine. But when it's some of the bigger people, bigger than me, bigger subscribers, then they don't mention like, hey, I heard it from Perch's channel. Then people will come onto my channel and start saying, why are you copying the bigger name? And I'm like, jackass, look at the date. But anyway, it doesn't. It's all fun and games mostly. It's all funny. I guess there's some people I heard that are trying to trying to convince some of the bigger YouTube channels to stop mentioning me because I'm too left wing. Apparently, this is a thing. Somebody sent me an email that was going around, kind of one of those tattle emails, like, "Hey, Perch is he's too close to people in the comic industry that are nasty, awful people, and so you need to quit giving him any kind of publicity." I think I don't know if Zach got one of these, but anyway, a couple people got this mail. It's like, whatever. It's weird to see it come around because certainly those things have been sent from the other direction. Now they're being sent here. Like, Jesus, can people just let people do whatever the f they want? Why do you need to get? This is YouTube drama. This is like stupid YouTube. This is very stupid. Anyway, it is what it is. There's some conversations going on around the future of comics. I've done a few videos, been talking about this. It's interesting to talk about. One of the things that has been said is absolutely true is that when people make predictions, there's kind of two things that happen, both negative. One, people make predictions of what they want to have happen versus what's actually going to have happen. And then they get very defensive and angry when you poke holes in that. It's like the people who say, Marvel is going to fold by Christmas. And it's like, that is my prediction. It's like, well, no, that's your hope. That's what you want to have happen. But there's actually no evidence. In fact, lots of data suggests that's not what's going to actually occur. But that's what you're hung on to. The other is where somebody makes a prediction and they don't like the prediction they're making. I do this all the time. I talk about how, it's likely that, for example, Marvel will start publishing more things that are more marketing based, more like PR, more like, teasers for movie projects and shows, and less like good monthly comics people want to read, but more like, informational type marketing books, right? And I don't like that prediction. So people will send me mail, go, "How dare you, you asshole, for wanting something?" I'm like, no, you're mistaking that. I don't want that to happen. I think that is what's going to happen. Very different. There's when you do predictions, especially if you're in a job like risk analysis or something like that. There's these jobs that are based on forecasting. And one of the ways you screw up that job, and this has been a problem for people, is that you don't forecast things you don't like. This is what happened a bit with the election in 2016, is some of the pollsters and some of the people really didn't want to stomach the idea of a Donald Trump winning. And so they intentionally almost polluted their own data. They started kind of disregarding the facts they didn't like. And as a result, they skewed their own information. I think CNN in a couple places admitted to this, that basically they did it to themselves. The danger, of course, is if you if you put out fake data, if you put out, and this is not fake news, but actually false data, if you put out data that is tilted in a certain way, you run the risk, a really strong risk, that you wind up delivering the outcome you don't want. You wind up ensuring the opposite because you get your side very comfortable with the fact that they're going to win, or they don't need to try hard. It's why elections have gotten very paranoid. Happened with California, where they didn't want the Democrats were really trying to push that, don't become confident that Gavin Newsom's just going to win, even though it looks like he's going to win, because if you get too confident, then you won't bother going to the polls, because foregone conclusion, that's how you lose. That's happened from time to time. With comics, I think we're in a lot of those things right now. The next several years are going to be messy, messy years. That's inevitable. We've got a lot of business practices that you've heard on this channel a ton that are just not sustainable practices. They're not things that make good financial sense. They're artificially inflated by the fact that Marvel and DC are owned by these billion-dollar entities that are not as concerned with profits and other things. And because of that, they do certain actions that don't make good business sense. The destructive power of that is that the independents often feel like they need to emulate or copy what the big two are doing, because that's how the game is played. But the big two are playing a game that's not financially stable, then the indies copying that is suicide. And I think we've seen the results of a lot of that right now. That's a lot of what's happening in comics. But there's another topic to talk about, and this is a curve that anyone, I think, who's worked in technology or has been a technologist or a futurist. By the way, one of the funniest things is in comics, it became popular. I'm not sure if it is anymore, but about 2-3 years ago, it became popular for comic writers to say, "I'm a futurist," not just because they heard the word in Iron Man 3, but because it was this idea of like, I'm on the bleeding edge. Somebody watched a bunch of TED Talks, they heard this kind of stuff, so they started regurgitating. But very few people, I think, actually did the work to understand what it meant. It was like the Dunning-Kruger effect for calling yourself a futurist. A futurist is somebody who's looking at forecasting, looking at predictions. They know something called the technology adoption curve. Now, if you know what that is, then immediately you can kind of picture it in your mind. It's a curve. It's like a bell curve, where it starts out, small, and then it rises, and then it tapers off, and you have different zones in that curve. This is a fascinating thing to learn and pay attention to and study, and I would recommend anyone do it. And you can get the gist of it within 5 minutes or so. It applies to lots of things, not just technology. Basically, it says there's 4 types of groups, and in some models there's more, but 4 types will work for the purposes of our discussion today. The first is called the early adopters. These are the people who naturally like to adopt new technology or new things. They're the ones who, in a comic perspective, they would go into a comic shop and they would buy something off the shelf that is a brand new #1 issue, unknown creative team. What the hell? They are experimenters. They're happy to try things. They are early adopters. They're going to jump in. They hear about Jonathan Hickman coming into X-Men. They're like, yeah, I'm going to reserve this, whatever he's doing. I don't even know that there's a House of X book yet. I'm just, I don't even know what he's on, but put me down for it. I'm an early adopter. I'm jumping in at the very beginning. In technology, these are the very first people who bought smartphones. Or if you've ever met somebody who you go to their house and they've bought like the Hue lights that can wire into their home automation system and change color if it's going to rain, that kind of stuff. These people are techie, they're geeky, they tend to be very informed about what's going on. Now, the thing about that audience is you never base your strategy of products around that audience. Now, why does that matter for comics? Well, because the early adopters are a tiny group, and they're not indicative of what's going to happen to the success of your comic or your product. The next group is the mass adopters. The mass adopters are the people who are, for lack of a better word, normies, that come in and say, yeah, I could use a phone. Smartphone, sure. I can see that I can get weather on that. Text messages looks kind of cool. I like Apple. I'll buy it. These are not the people who stand in line, who reserve technology, who, this isn't the person who goes and they a year before it comes out, have a reservation in for the PlayStation 5. These are people who they're like, I'm going to go into the store, I'm going to try and buy it. And if it's not available for me because it's sold out, then I'll try again the next week, and eventually I'll get it. That's the group that you want as a product company, because that's where most of your money comes from this second group. That's the group that basically they opt in, say, I want to buy something. I'm not going to be the very first mover, but I'm going to do something. This would be the equivalent of the group that came in when House of X Powers of 10 started. The first issue or two got good reviews, and then suddenly everybody, this group is all buying the X-Men series and saying, yeah, it's pretty good now, you should go buy it. That's the second group. The third group is called the copycats. This is the group that basically they buy what they perceive as popular. This group is very linked to the second group. But you can see how these happen in quick succession. If the second group comes in, again using comics, and says, House of X, Powers of 10, I'm buying it. There you go. This is something I enjoy, I like. I wasn't signed up a year in advance to get this comic, but it hit the stands and I saw good reviews for issue 1 and 2. I showed up to the store. I was able to find still copies of 1 and 2 on the shelves, and now I'm collecting it. That's that second group. The third group goes, hey, everybody seems to be buying House of X, Powers of 10. I'm seeing that guy's name everywhere. I need it too. This group is going to move when the second group moves. So when the second group of adopters move, the third group, the copycat group, they will then trail along. If you're a product company, your goal is to get something out and do some initial testing, get some initial buzz, basically work out the kinks with the early adopters. Those are the people who are going to forgive you if you deliver absolute shit, because they're just excited to see the newest of everything. So they're going to be very forgiving of problems. But if you have a good strategy, you put out a comic, for example, you get some early looks at it. Those people give you the thumbs up. You learn from them. You tune, you change your writing, your art, your direction slightly to appeal to the mass market. You get your mass market on board. That then leads to get your copycats on board. And then that final group, that last thing, those are the late adopters. Those are the people who are at the very end. They move because they have no choice. In a technology world, this is like the person who's still carrying around the Motorola flip phone, and they don't want it. They're happy with what they've got. They don't want to move to what everybody else has got that's popular, but they eventually are forced to, because the phone breaks, because the battery stops working, because they're no longer able to use the product that they love, and so grudgingly they come along and they buy what's on the market, what everybody else has got. Now again, from a comic perspective, this last group would be the people who want to read comics, they like comics, but they just can't, they just hate everything that's going on, but they want something to read. So they will kind of hold their nose, find the least offensive thing to them, and go for it. That's what that last group is. Now, why does all this matter? Well, when you understand these four groups, it puts into perspective almost everything that goes on in the comic industry, and how people buy things and how audiences adopt and consume products. It also, once you understand that, shows you how screwed up the current comic industry largely is, because they don't play to these different markets. Instead, using the X-Men example, they put some material out. They got that early adopter, the people who buy anything. They got them excited. They started buying. They then proceeded to just jam into the market lots of things to that very small audience. This, in some cases, is the equivalent of the people on Twitter who do not understand kind of mass adoption or any of that. They stop playing to the normies, and as a result, they never get the copycats. Right now, for example, again, using the X-Men line, I don't mean to beat up on them so much, but it's a fascinating case study of how everything has gone on. You look at a title like, like X-Force or New Mutants or Excalibur. That group never managed to achieve to get accepted by the mass market. So as a result, the book never had really significant buzz, so that the people who basically buy whatever is popular, they never came around either. And this is how the entire kind of publishing strategy became completely hinged on that group of early adopters. Now, we love early adopters. They're great. They will come in, they will buy things, they will help support products. But you can't sustain a company off of early adopters. You have to eventually get to the mass market. Every tech group knows this. Every consumer product, manufacturing product groups knows this. But comics struggles. So when we talk about kind of predictions and the future and everything else, this model shows us how that's done. When we talk about digital adoption, you look back at this model. Okay, what's going to have to happen? Right now, there's some early adopters that are enjoying digital comics. They made the transition. It's easier for them. Paper is weird. Holding up a monthly floppy comic doesn't feel right anymore because they crossed the chasm. They made that leap. But what hasn't happened is we haven't gotten the mass normie audience to read digital comics yet. And I think that's going to be a lot harder than people think. It was easy in Japan. It was easy in Korea. It was easy in areas like that did adopt it. But here in the US, the readers are expensive. That's a problem. The idea of sitting in front of your computer to read comics is a bridge too far for a lot of normies. That's not going to work. That is going to continue to be a problem until there's a tipping point. And to use another example, on the mobile phone, there were apps and games that were available on the Motorola Razr, that flip phone, for years before the iPhone came out. But it was perceived by the normies to be just too clunky of an experience, too annoying, too hard, not pleasant, just not good. People stuck with their Blackberries if they wanted to type on the phone or a Palm device. That was it. The iPhone comes out and suddenly it introduces the idea of, hey, it's actually easy to look at apps and do games and stuff on the phone. Then suddenly everyone moves to it. You've got to appeal to those normies. In comics, whether you're talking about digital, whether you're talking about a new line, whether you're talking about a new comic, it's got to, at some point, hook the normies. If you can hook the normies, you can hook that mass audience, you're going to hook the copycats, you're then going to take care, everything else takes care of itself. You've then achieved the audience. By the way, when we talk about these groups, if you're thinking about percentages, the early adopters are, 5% of the audience, maybe 10 in some markets, but 5% is a good way to look at it. The mass market is 35 to 40. The copycats are 30%. That's the bulk. That's where all the money comes from. That's why playing to the normies and playing to the people who copy what's popular, that's what a winning strategy is all about. Anyway, that was probably a lot of dumb business talk that nobody wants to hear, but there you go. I did it anyway. I hope there's a couple people in the audience that are very excited by this. Mumbles is listening to this and thinking of all the different jokes he can give about kind of boring financial techie talk. But I promise you, I will give you this. All jokes aside, understanding the adoption curve, understanding kind of how people psychologically adopt products, come in, view things, it makes so much in comics matter. It clarifies so much for you. If you're doing a crowdfunding book, if you're thinking about any kind of strategy all along, even if you work for the big two and you're thinking about how to reach different people, understanding that model is some of the best advice I can give you. It will make you more powerful. And in comics, almost nobody understands this model. So go look for technology adoption curve on Google, search for it. You'll see a little graph. If I'm bright enough, I'll put one on the screen while I'm doing this, but go just read up on it. There's videos, like 4-minute videos talking about it. Listen to it. Listen to a much better analysis than what I've just given around the different groups, how to play to those groups. You're just making yourself more powerful. Thanks for listening.